Good evening, everyone, and welcome. It is not yet 8 p.m., but we are opening up the room in anticipation of all of our participants this evening. We're going to start right after 8 o'clock, so please bear with us. We're so excited that you're joining us on this stormy evening. Please bear with us. We'll get started in just a few moments. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started in just a few moments. We're going to give a little bit of time for folks to come in. We know it's storming outside, so we just want to be mindful. Some people might be shaking off that rain and toweling off their hair, so we just want to give everybody a few minutes to come on inside. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Good evening to everyone who's joining us. We're going to get started in just a minute. It's just now 8 o'clock. We want to give a few moments grace to those who might be just joining us now. We know that it is storming outside if you're in New York or anywhere along the East Coast. So we want to give a few moments for everyone to come in and join us for this very fun and exciting evening. I know I'm very excited to be chatting with Liz tonight, and so I'm very much excited to share this conversation with all of you. So we're just going to give another minute to let anyone who's just joining us just to get settled. Okay, hello everyone, good evening. My name is Leah Fellner. I am the Director of Alumni at Ramaz, and it is my pleasure to welcome you this evening to Don't Quit for a Bit, from tenured law professor to stand-up comedian, with Liz Glazer. We're so excited to have her this evening. But before we get started, I'm going to begin the evening as we do for all of our Zoom calls and send our best wishes, our refuah shalema, and our condolences to anyone in the community who is ill, anyone who is in need of a refuah, and anyone who has lost a family member. We want you all to know that we are here with you. The Ramaz community is here for you. If there's anything that you need or anything that we can do for you, please feel free to reach out to us. We also want to give a big thank you and Ya Asher Koach, a big, keep going strong to all of our medical, healthcare, and frontline workers who are out there still every day doing God's work, as Kenny likes to say, keeping everyone safe and healthy. And so we wish everyone the best. I'm so excited that we're all here tonight. I'm so excited to see so many of you. I know that for those of you that are in New York, it is very, very wet out. For those of you that are not in New York, if you're in the tri-state area, I'm sure it's just as wet. If you're not in New York, I'm sure you've seen on the news. So thank you for joining us. I'm here tonight with Liz Glazer, class of 97. She's a comedian, a writer, an actor. Before all of that, she was a law professor, a job that she says she was very funny at. Liz has appeared on Out TV in Canada and has opened for comedians like Mike Kaplan and Maria Bamford. Liz graduated from Ramaz in 1997 before going to Penn, where she received a BA and an MA in philosophy in 2001. She went to the University of Chicago for law school and graduated in 2004. Liz worked at Fried Frank in the real estate department for just under 2 years before becoming a tenure track and then a tenured law professor at Hofstra for 9 years, ultimately retiring, which we're going to talk about tonight, in 2015. Liz recently moved back to the East Coast from LA, and she says she's very excited to be here, but I hope she's very excited to be here as well.
I am.
Liz, welcome.
Thank you, Leah. Yeah, it's embarrassing to hear bios, even when you wrote them yourself. But it's also like, I think about all of those things on my bio and I'm like, I use none of them in my life. I could do everything I do with none of those degrees. Not that I think that they're not worthwhile, but now I'm in the business of finding things funny and absurd. And to some degree, there is a level of ridiculousness that I'm aware of when listening to my bio and then looking around my life and being like, was that all necessary? I don't know.
I like to say that I went to college and I just had a good time, and then I thought about what I wanted to do and then just did those things. I studied,
Sure.
I read a lot of books. I went to a lot of interesting classes. I didn't really study anything that made my career. But
I mean, I suppose that's like the model of education. And, I certainly don't have like a terribly strong or evidence-based view about whether it's a good or a bad thing. Again, I truly just mean to point it out to make fun of myself, which I am in the business of doing. But yeah, like, I mean, I know in law school, and this is something that I remember knowing as a student, and then when I was teaching law school, that it's not that you're teaching people the law, but rather you're teaching people how to think like a lawyer, which isn't so different from like Talmud class, where you also learn to think like a lawyer. I remember actually a Ramaz story, and those who were in this class, this was a dinim class, and at the time my teacher was Rabbi Morel. And at that time, I guess this must have been maybe 95, 96, he was in law school at night during the class, like during the time that we took that class. And we had this test on the laws of Kashrut. And the irony was that, I was not the most kosher person of my friend group in terms of like my family's level of observance and that kind of thing. Like we had, he's an immigration lawyer. I know that that's in the private chat, but I'm guessing, Kenny Rob, that specific piece of information is totally fine to share. In the event it's not, Leah will edit it out, but that's wonderful. So anyway, so Rabbi Morel, during the time when he was training to become an immigration lawyer, but not yet one, at, I believe, Fordham at Night, gave us this test about the laws of Kashrut, but he made the test similar to what I would later learn was like a law school test. And law school tests, as opposed to basically any other kind of test, they're fact patterns. And so basically it's like, you read this whole set of facts about everything that went wrong in a situation such that you, the exam taker or the law student, can assess on the basis of the statutes and rules and cases that you've learned throughout the semester, here's what you should do in response to all the stuff that went wrong. And I didn't know how to do that, but I guess instinctively there was something in me that was like good at it, because despite the fact that I was not really good at being kosher in life, I did very well on that exam. And I remember, and this sounds like bragging, maybe it is, but I hope that it's okay. I got 115 on that exam, which was all of the points and all of the extra credit. And the exam had to be thrown out because people did so badly on it. And Rabbi Morel was like, that I guess makes sense. You guys have no preparation for like these kinds of exams. Really, I just learned about them like yesterday and I got excited. So I wrote one like I take in law school. But anyway, it was a really good exam. My friends who are still my friends to this day, like Sarah Feldschreiber, and I joke about, it was an impromptu barbecue. Basically, it was a barbecue where like, you know, he used like fleshik and milchik and you had to figure out what to do.
Great. Incredible. Incredible.
Great. Yeah.
So let's talk a little tachlis here.
Sure.
For anyone in the audience this evening, if you have any questions for Liz throughout the evening, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to shoot us a question. I know some folks are raising their hands. There isn't a way for us to call on you at this moment. So just
I love that you're doing that. That's so exciting.
If you have a question or you want to say something to Liz, just put it in the Q&A and I'll read it out. And we'll get to that. So let's talk about your time at Ramaz, Liz. So walk me through, give me like a great memory. I mean, obviously this test, it sounds like a great memory, although.
I mean, honestly, Leah, that test, it was the best I had ever done on a test in my entire life. Like, I wasn't even good at law school tests when I was in law school. I don't think I would have done very well on the test that I wrote for students to take. But that test, it's just like sometimes the stars align, you have a really good day. And that was what happened with that test.
Yes.
But to answer your question.
Yeah, so give me like a great Ramaz, something that you've carried with you through your life.
Sure.
So a memory, a thought, interaction with a faculty member or a friend that you either still have or don't have anymore.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm very happy to report that I have like a group of us, there's 7 of us, including me. So 6 other women who are still friends. We live together at Penn. We have a group chat that is, we call ourselves 4045 because that was the number of our house on Locust, off campus, but like very near campus at Penn. And 5 of the 7 of us know each other from Ramaz. The other 2 didn't go to Ramaz. They were, one's from Milwaukee, one's from Los Angeles. And it's like a fun thing amongst our friend group is that like stories that we all tell from Ramaz, but that they didn't know initially, they then learned because in order to like integrate fully into our friend group, it was like they kind of needed to know these things as pieces of useful information that they would need moving forward in order to be integrated into the friend group. 2 of the 5 who went to Ramaz, also we went to Mariah together. So my oldest and best friend, Shira Ackerman, Shira Lubar is her maiden name. She's also she's continues to be one of my closest friends, along with the others in the group, Ariel Groveman Wiener, Robin Levenfuss Shapiro, Sarah Honig Feldschreiber, Shira, me.
Name dropping everywhere.
Well, no, I don't mean it to be name dropping. I mean it to be inclusive. So I hope it comes across that way. And anyway, so, and now I'm just like checking, like I didn't forget it. 7 is a lot to count to, it's not like 2 or 3, but I do think I covered everybody. Anyway, so one memory that involves actually Shira, and is a really great memory of mine from high school. And in terms of, we were talking at the beginning of this about how I don't use any of my education. And of course I mean that in jest. But probably like I do stand up now, or I guess I did before the pandemic. I sit in front of my computer and talk a lot in the pandemic, because that's what stand up is. But I feel like I started really in Ramaz. And so I ran and ultimately got to be senior vice president of the GO. And in order to do that, as I imagine is still the case, one gives a speech. You give this speech to the student body, and that's a big part of the election process. And I wrote my speech and I read it to Shira the night before, and Shira, who's Shira knows me better than a lot of people and is also able to edit me better than almost anyone. And it was maybe like midnight, and she was just like, yeah, we have to rewrite this. And so she stayed on the phone with me until we were on the phone for like a lot of time. So like 2, 3 in the morning, whatever it was. And that speech that Shira wrote was the reason that I got elected. It was 100% the reason I got elected. And, you know, now, like, I write stuff a lot and I still send it to Shira, and Shira still reads it and gives me feedback. And, you know, she's a lot busier than I am, so I really appreciate it. And that was a good memory from high school, and also answers your question about friends.
Did you have an inkling? I mean, it seems like maybe from this Talmud test that maybe you had an inkling that you were going to become a lawyer, but did you have any sort of inkling that comedy or stand-up or anything in that area was going to be in your future?
No, I don't think I did. I mean, I always knew that I liked being funny, and I knew that I could make people laugh that were like very close to me.
Sure.
And I guess like it wasn't until that speech that I knew that I could do it truly for a group. But to be honest, like, you know, I grew up in a family of children of Holocaust survivors as parents. And I believe that the trauma manifested in such a way that my parents thought if I and my brother didn't go to like professional school, that like the Nazis were going to come for them. And I obviously that's hyperbolic, and I get that, but like I believe that there is something to that in terms of like my dad used to say all the time, nobody can take your education away from you. And that always, you know, gave me the visual of like clutching diplomas as God forbid someone's knocking on your door. And I guess, you know, as Jews, especially with that heritage specifically in your family, there is this blend of that trauma that then translates to humor, because it's kind of like, if you're having that visual and there aren't people at your door, I hope you can laugh at that, you know? And so all of that to say that I didn't think comedy was in my future, because I wouldn't have had any idea how to make a profession out of that. I don't know that I do now, but at least now I have the ability to laugh at myself and sort of recognize that there are many ways to have a life and a living. Right. But then I had no clue.
Got it. That's, I mean, that's obvious, that's common. And I think that's a sentiment that's shared amongst many members of the community. Obviously, many people who, you know, have a day job and a night job. A lot of people in the entertainment industry, I'm sure. But that's interesting to note that, you know, you were just like funny. You were the funny, you know, you were the class clown. You were the kid who liked making people laugh.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't even know that I was all of that. Like, I think I had the ability to be funny. I don't know that I was like the funniest or anything like that, but I think I had some shining moments, and ultimately had a desire to express myself.
Sure. Okay, before we move on to the college years, as the, you know, the spin-off of many great high school TV shows. We have 2 quick questions. It looks like, do you remember Mrs. Gorfinkel?
Yeah,
she taught math.
Yes.
It looks like maybe Josh or her are saying hello.
Yeah, for sure I do. I was never in Mrs. Gorfinkel's class, because Mrs. Gorfinkel taught very smart people how to do math, and I was only so in that department, so I knew of her, and I always wished I was able to take those classes, but it was not happening. Yes.
And then we have an anonymous question that's asking if you had a favorite in dress code outfit at Ramaz. I wonder if this is a leading question from a friend.
I believe it is a leading question, and I feel very proud of myself that I feel like I'm going to nail it. So I had this skirt. It was a wraparound skirt. It was denim, but I'm going to say that, like, I don't know if people are familiar with, like, you know when you're just not sure it's denim, and there's not like kashrut for denim, I don't think. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, if something's kosher, not kosher, or gold or not gold, but like, is it actually denim? Like, I think it was made of paper. I think it was like tax forms that were somehow melded into a skirt. And I got the skirt, I believe, from A&S when that department store used to exist. My mother's in the audience, and I'm pretty sure that I'm right about that. Now it's Lord & Taylor, which I think RIP. We don't have to talk about department stores. It's way too depressing. I mean, the Holocaust, when we talked about that, that was fine. But now we're getting into retail, and I think I should stop. Too much drama. But anyway, so it was the kind of thing where it was a long wraparound skirt. And so, as maybe you and others in the chat know, like sometimes, especially if it's not in fashion a year, getting long skirts, it's hard, you know, unless you're going to like Brooklyn or whatever, that if you're just going to like a regular department store or the Gap, like it can be hard to find a long skirt. And so I found this like down to the floor wraparound. They were very in. I was like, this is my skirt. And I think it may have been like $30-something, but which was fine to buy for in my eyes. But then it rang up as $1.19. Exactly.
What a deal.
It was the best. And not only was it the best, but then I was like, you know, I really love this skirt. And I think the thing about it that I love the most is not that it's passing itself off as denim, but exactly that it was $1.19. And so I started writing $1.19 on the skirt to a point that it was basically tattooed in the fact that it was $1.19. And though it was dress code compliant, my friends, and I believe this was Sherry Damast, who, and again, that's a name drop. That's a celeb. And Sherry and I think Robin were like the main people who were like, Liz cannot wear this skirt anymore. So I think it was like junior retreat. It wasn't freshman seminar, but it was still the Berkeley Carteret on the beach where it was like freezing cold, but you still go to the beach. Anyway, they did a tug of war with my $1.19 skirt, which was actually quite easy due to the fact that it was made of not denim, and they ripped it. And then I think I wore a garbage bag skirt from the Gap, like a black skirt that looked like a garbage bag. Basically, I was really casual. Like, I basically wore quarantine clothes in all of high school.
Got it.
But skirts. Yeah. So that's...
I have a story for another time. I too got a skirt for 98 cents, and I never paid full price for something again for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I see.
That's a story for another time. But I feel you. Yeah. So let's talk about college and grad school, and then grad school again.
Okay.
So you went to Penn. Just very briefly, why Penn? Did you have a special reason, or was it just like you and your friends were all going there?
Yeah, I mean, we like the fact that most of my friends did go there. It was certainly relevant, but and even though now looking back, like it's kind of like I think we're all so glad that it ended up happening. But I don't know if senior year of high school we were like looking forward in exactly that way. It just sort of happened. I think I went because it was like farther away than Columbia.
Sure.
And I had the sense that like if I went to Columbia, my dad would be at my dorm every single night.
Got it.
And I don't think that's an exaggeration. And like, though that would have been lovely, and though I can think fondly about what I might have missed out on by that, I do think that like going a little bit further away was helpful in terms of just like having a college experience. And also I think I visited, and now I'm trying to remember if it was, I know that I stayed for a weekend. I did that thing, you know, where you go for the weekend, and I just had a great time. And I just thought like, this seems like camp, but school in the way that college seemed like on, you know, in movies and TV. And I thought that was fun.
Yeah. Sometimes that's all you need. And that's actually something, you know, just a slight tangent. That's something that we're talking about now for our current, you know, our juniors and seniors this year. It's obviously the admission process is going to be very different and somewhat difficult. Right. A lot of campuses are not allowing guests on campus. You obviously can't spend the weekend there. And so we're trying to, myself, along with Kenny, who's here playing my role tonight, actually. I'm normally behind the scenes, along with our college guidance team. We're brainstorming ways to make selecting, trying to figure out the selection process for schools a little more, trying to make it a little more fun, a little more less stressful during a time that's already, the stress has already ratcheted up.
I get that, by the way. I mean, it's like people talk about like the old college try. I'm like, I tried way harder in high school. So I totally get the pressure aspect.
Yeah. So you did both an undergraduate degree and a master's degree in philosophy. And then you were like, okay, I have a master's. I'm going to get another professional degree and I'm going to go to law school.
Sure.
Why?
Well, I had always planned to go to law school. And that's due to, I think the parental pressure, but like, I don't mean that to distance myself from it or to say that I didn't agree with it as well. Like, I get it. And I still get it, even though, I joke about like not using my degrees. Like, I think it was for the best and I'm very happy that I did it all. But basically it was like, I guess for security, to have like a job where I could earn a living, that sort of thing, like boring answers to like why I went to law school. And then in terms of the master's in philosophy, honestly, that was more of a logistical feat than it was an intellectual one. Because basically, so at Penn, which is a big school, and it's a school where due to like Wharton, for example, there's a big push for like business classes and majors. Not that that's just what it is, but there's a lot of that at Penn. And there's less of an emphasis on humanities, or at least there was when I was there, I would say, at least relatively speaking. So I was a philosophy major. I was into it. I always loved like Talmud and stuff like that. And so that was a pretty natural, way that things worked out in terms of my interests. But like as a philosophy major at Penn, if I were to take a class, like let's say I wanted to take a class on Kant or Descartes, because it was a relatively small department, it wasn't the case that there was like the undergrad level and the graduate level. And so what ended up happening by the time I was a senior was I had already taken half of a master's degree's worth of classes. And it was also the case that I had taken enough classes to graduate. And so those two facts together caused me to have a pretty good case when I went to the department head of the philosophy department. And I was like, hey, could I just spend my final semester of my time here getting the rest of this degree? And they actually said, they were like, well, the last person who tried to do that failed out. And I was like, okay, well, let me try. And then it was fine.
I went to Ramaz. I know what I'm doing. It's fine.
I mean, no, it's not to say that it didn't have hard moments. Like, it was a lot of writing, and, there were definitely like a lot of moments in a study lab and all that. But, I was pretty confident that I could do it.
Got it. Okay. So did you, so we're in college, you're in law school.
Sure.
So you're in law school in Chicago.
Yes.
At either of these points, had you done, like, again, was comedy on your radar? Had you done an open mic night? Were you a part of an improv troupe? Like anything?
No.
Were you exploring any of those options?
I wasn't. I mean, no, I wasn't. Like, I was funny with my friends, but like, to be honest, I don't think I'm the funniest of my friends, and I think that's a good thing. And they're not comedians. I mean, the same friends that I name dropped earlier. And, I didn't know from like how to do any of that. So no.
Okay. So you graduate law school and you accept this very prestigious position with Freed Frank, and you're in the thick of it as an associate.
Sure.
You're doing the 9 to 7, 9 to 10, 9 to 9,
I don't know
whatever
that
it
there's
is.
any end point.
Right. You're just there. You go in at 9 and then you're just there till
one long day.
Yeah. So walk me and everybody who's listening in through your transition from being a lawyer, being an associate, to gaining this position at Hofstra.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, it was a matter of checking my mail. That's what it comes down to. So I was at Fried Frank, which was a great experience for me. I'm still in touch with a lot of the people actually who I used to work with. I go to alumni events. Like, if they were an organization that accepted donations and like not for profit, I probably would give them money, but you know, they're not like that. But I feel a sense, much like I do to Ramaz and Penn and University of Chicago, a sense of that alumni connection with Fried Frank. They're great. And I was there and I was like checking my work mail, which was basically checking spam. You know, like it's not like nobody sent me letters to work. I wouldn't have even known my address. Like, it was just like where I showed up. And then, you know, you get like brochures for CLE courses or something like that, continuing legal education, like nothing that I ever opened, but I just like it was like checking the garbage. And so I was checking the garbage, and then there was this letter from Hofstra Law School, and I just knew of Hofstra Law School because I grew up in this area. I think they used to advertise on the radio. Hofstra did, and so I was like aware. And also my aunt went there. And so I opened this letter, and again, I really thought it was like spam. But then when I started reading, I'm like, it kind of seems like maybe this isn't spam. And it was this thing about like, have you ever thought of being a law professor? This is, you know, this is who we are. We're the hiring committee, blah, blah. And when I went to law school, I liked standing in front of people and saying stuff. I always knew that I liked that sort of like barking at a crowd kind of thing. And when I was in law school, I was somewhat discouraged, and that's no fault of anyone specific or even general, but I was like discouraged from that being a viable option because generally speaking, to be a law professor, you know, there's this idea that you have to go to Yale from kindergarten to law school and get straight A's along the way and honors up the wazoo. And I didn't have that story. I did fine. I did well enough. And there were aspects of me that were, you know, something someone could brag about at Rosh Hashanah. But like overall, I wouldn't say that I was like 100% or 1,000% stellar, which is the impression that I even now have, having sat on hiring committees for hiring people who had my job, and I didn't have that stuff. What I did in law school was I committed to publishing a paper. And that was how these people at Hofstra on the hiring committee found me. So I wrote a paper in law school. It was published. It was searchable on like, you know, Westlaw, LexisNexis, how lawyers find things. And Hofstra Law School that year was having this out-of-the-box hiring strategy. From what I understand, it was basically the years prior. They had, you know, found people to interview who then chose other New York schools over them. And interviewing for a law professor position, it's an intense interview process. And so you end up, as a hiring committee and as a school, faculty, spending a lot of time, you know, with people who end up choosing somebody else. And so they were like, oh, let's pick a different hiring strategy. We'll find people who wrote a paper, who went to a law school from 1 to whatever on US News, wherever they cut it off, and we'll reach out to them individually. So I get this letter in the garbage, and I'm like, it has a number. I'll call the number. I end up calling this guy who ended up being my colleague, and I was like, did you send this to 10 people, 10,000 people? I don't know. He's like, more like 10. And then we started the interview process. And even through the interview process, like my mentors from law school were like, you're not going to get this job. It is a very difficult job to get, but you're playing with the house's money. Just keep going. And I got it, you know, and that's, I mean, a career in entertainment has that same sort of roulette quality to it where everyone tells you you're not going to make it. And the thing is, I may not, but I've been told that I won't for a long time. Like even when I was in college, when I was telling you about the logistical feat graduating with the master's, there was this guy from like, who was also a philosophy major in the department. He was like, you're not going to graduate. And I was like, what? And, you know, somebody like, I think sometimes it's a real gift, somebody literally telling you like, you're not going to make this happen. Cause it's like, thank you for the very specific challenge. Just watch.
I feel like that's a very, I don't know. I don't know if it's, it might be like a yeshiva day school thing. It's like a very competitive, I've also gotten one of those. I've gotten into situations like that before, where it's like a lot of people have told me like, this isn't going to work out. You know, you need, like, you either personally, like, you don't have this and this, or like whatever group that I was with, you guys don't have this thing, you're not doing it, whatever it is. And either myself or collectively, we were just like, I don't believe you, just watch, we're going to do it anyway, and we're going to prove you wrong. That was also a mindset that was instilled in me as like from a family. I grew up, I took the school, but I was a suburb. I grew up in Jersey. I was a suburbs kid. I took the bus to school. And for those of you that took the bus, you know that there are bullies on the bus sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, or maybe you have a teacher who underestimates you or whatever it is. And so, you know, my mother, my father, you know, and I told it to my sisters when I have two younger sisters. And it was always prove them wrong. It was always rise up and do the thing that they're telling you that you can't. You know, if you can't physically do it, that's something else.
Sure.
But if they're emotionally underestimating you, or educationally underestimating you, that's different. You can overcome those things, and you can prove them wrong. And I think that that's a trait that I don't know if it's specifically yeshiva day school oriented. I don't know if it's specifically a woman thing. I think that might be it a little bit.
It might be. It's also like very like Hamilton, you know, at least the way that Lin-Manuel Miranda tells the story. I mean, I feel like that's part of the reason that I related so much to that musical. It's just like, you know, just you wait, you know?
Right.
Anyway, yes, I do think.
Okay, so you're at Hofstra, you get this job that like people don't think you're gonna get. You know, it could have, you know, they could have sent this letter to 10,000 people. You find out later that it's really more like 10. You get the job.
A lot of people didn't even reply.
Right, exactly, right, because you said it's a letter in the garbage, which I love, by the way, like a Val pack. You know, you got to go through it, even though you know you're not going to use any of the coupons.
You never know. You could find $1.19 or 98-cent skirt.
Okay, so you're at Hofstra. You're teaching. You're enjoying yourself. You're tenure tracked. You get your tenure, and then what happens?
So it was a great gig. I mean, if you can find a way to be a law professor and you're really into writing and teaching and thinking about the law, and you know you want a life of that, I think that it's a great job. You know, people in that profession all the time would say, like, this is the best job in the world, and it was very different actually from when I showed up at Fried Frank, and frankly. At Friedley, people did not say that. And so even though I thought that both were good jobs, but I think because it was so great, I sort of allowed myself to dream even bigger. And I think that like, because I was like, I love writing and I like writing about these legal problems, but if I'm being totally honest, I think I'd rather just write about myself. And I love teaching, but the moments that I feel the greatest connection, you know, it's not that I mind teaching about the rule against perpetuities or adverse possession, but if I'm being honest, it's the way that I taught about the estates and land system by analogizing it to how my dad orders grilled chicken at a Chinese restaurant. Because, I mean, if anybody knows about the estates and land system, obviously very hilarious. No, it's like this old way of delineating interests in property, and we still use it despite the fact that it's a literal relic from feudal times. And if you look at a deed for your house, you will see, you know, hopefully that you have fee simple title, and that's a term that we use from days of old. And basically, like, you know, it's this rite of passage in property law, and I would teach it by telling people about how my father, who was of Latvian descent and very sure of what he wanted, and he didn't care about where he was, to like order it appropriately. He was just like, give me grilled chicken. And if you're at a Chinese restaurant, they don't have that. And so my point was in teaching this way was I was like, you have a menu of options for property interests. And even if you want to kind of design your own, you kind of can't. And so we learned about it by way of that. And when I thought about like, what do I love about teaching? It was like kind of the moment when I told them about my dad ordering at a restaurant, not as much the moment of teaching about the estates and land system. Not that I was very like willing to do the thing that I'm supposed to do. And I don't think I had that much protest about it. It was more that once I started on a track of kind of like, you can basically do whatever you want, which is basically true as a law professor, then I just started realizing that there are things I like more and less within that very expansive world. And after I got tenure, I was visiting at another law school for the semester. I was at Northwestern, which is in Chicago, and it's a town that has a lot of comedy. And somebody like who I was friends with through a class I took in improv was like, hey, have you ever thought of doing stand-up comedy? And I had a very big crush on her, and she invited me to do stand-up comedy on her show. And so I was like, I've never thought about doing stand-up comedy, but I definitely have thought of being anywhere you are. So yes, I will do it. And it was great. And that kind of started me on a track of like, okay, this is possible. And I'm kind of sure that I want it to be my next step, but I also recognize that that's a little nuts.
Sure. So that is a little nuts. As someone who is at the beginning of their career, or at the middle beginning, I guess you could say, I've loved comedy my whole life. I've grown up on it. I've idolized it. The thought many a night has gone through my mind to get up one night and do like 5 minutes about my family at the Rosh Hashanah table, you know, all that sort of stuff. But to actually think about that being a next step, like a real next step, is like a very scary thought.
I can believe that,
obviously. So how did that actually come to fruition for you? How did you actually make that your next step?
Yeah, so I did the show, and I didn't necessarily have material, but I had the faith of someone who was like, you're very weird and funny, and I think you would do well in this environment. And then also my mother sent me a package on my way out the door to the show. And I like a friend of mine who I trusted, who was a performer as well, was like, whatever you do, just be vulnerable. And I was like, but how do I do that? And I was like freaking out about that after I was freaking out about like, what do I say? And am I actually funny? And like, whatever. And so she said, be vulnerable. And I was like, well, the easiest way and a shortcut kind of way to be vulnerable is just to not know something. Anything. And so I saw this package on my way out the door, and it was I didn't even know actually it was from my mom. I saw it was just from Amazon. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just open the package on stage. Like I literally have no idea what it is. I didn't order anything. Turned out that my mother like was at my apartment, and she noticed that one of my cats, Mona, and I have these white fluffy cats. So my cat Mona would perch herself on top of the area in my closet where my dark suits that I would wear to teach school were. And so my suits had this white fluffy cat hair on them. And my mother was like, Elizabeth, and my mom, it's like she paid for every letter. So I'm Liz, but she calls me Elizabeth. Anyway, and vowels are expensive. So she was like, Elizabeth, you have to get vinyl suit protectors for your suits. And I was like, okay, mommy, I will. And she knew I wouldn't. So she just ordered them to my apartment. And anyway, first rule of comedy, and everybody knows this, is that vinyl suit covers from your mother, funny. And so basically I just went on stage. I opened the package, I explained this to everybody, and I was just like myself because I didn't have kind of the time to think about being anybody else. And I do think that a rule of comedy is that if you can get to being yourself, you're probably going to do well. And anyway, the night, and that was in like, you know, a theater that was kind of like a camp bunk equivalent, you know, it was full, but it was like a pretty small theater. And the night after, I mean, I was convinced that I had just played Madison Square Garden, killed for adoring fans, and was 100% a celebrity. And I knew that wasn't true, but I also wasn't 100% sure. I was like very delusional about it. And I had this like download of a vision that's very narcissistic, but here's what happened in it. I was being interviewed on The Tonight Show in this vision. This did not happen, but it happened in my brain. And in that vision, on The Tonight Show, I was asked as a question, I was like, okay, so Liz, you were a law professor for a decade, and then you decided to do stand-up comedy. And this was in my 7th year of teaching, but the download was what it was. So he says, decade, and I say, you know, actually, Jimmy, it was 9 years. And that was what I envisioned. Not explainable, but whatever. And I was like, oh, I think that's funny. I think it's funny to round down from 10 to 9 because most people would round up, especially if it advantages them, but I wouldn't because I'm a lawyer. I was a law professor. I'm also, you know, like me, so I'm going to notice that detail and kind of do it to my disadvantage. And I know I just started being funny last night, but this is my vision. And then about 11 months later, the dean of my law school happened to be they were in a budget moment or something, and he called all the tenured faculty members, which I was one, and offered them buyout packages. And the way that a conversation like that goes is like you're told all of the tranches of the buyout package over the phone, and there's no like memo. So I'm like, you know, writing them down in my planner, and there's a bunch of them, you know, half-time, quarter-time, eighth-time, whatever. And then the second to last one was, or you could quit at the end of this year. The last one was, or you could quit at the end of next year, which would have been 9 years. Nice. And so the title of this talk was Don't Quit for a Bit. And the reason for that is that in the interim 11 months between when I had that vision of the Tonight Show interview and when I talked to my dean, and that was the last option for, you know, retiring, basically, I told myself, don't quit for a bit, especially if it's maybe not even funny. So anyway, I told him that I would retire at the end of the following year, my 9th year, and he was like, what? And I told him this whole story. And then he was like, I definitely have to get off the phone.
You're a crazy person. Thank you for teaching at our school for less than 10 years.
Yes.
So you finish out your tenure at Hofstra. You move out to LA.
Right.
What are you doing in LA? Are you like writing?
Yeah.
Are you just doing stand-up? Are you like a waitress? What's going on?
Sure. Yeah, no, I did writing, stand-up, and acting. And that's what I've been doing. I did not wait tables then. I have in my life, but that wasn't what I did. I also saw that there was a question in the chat from Kenny about my stand-up comedy hero, which I just want to address. And I would say, like, lately I love Mike Kaplan and Maria Bamford, who have been friends and people who've mentored me. I think they're great and examples of people who are able to be really good at comedy and really kind. And the more I do this, the more I care the most about that. And also I love Mike Birbiglia stuff and really just like stringing together a very long story with like every bit of it being intentional. There's such a beauty in that synthesis, and that's truly what I look up to.
To Drink Mike was my first comedy album.
Oh, nice.
This is how I know that this is a beautiful friendship blossoming.
Yes.
Because To Drink Mike was my first, for anyone who doesn't know, Mike Birbiglia is an incredible comedian. If you haven't heard any of his stand-up, I urge you to go out to your, nearest record store.
I think they're all on Netflix now.
His last 3 shows are all on Netflix. I was privileged enough to see him on Broadway for his last, for the last one that he did.
Yeah.
His movie Sleepwalk with Me. I mean, all of them they're all incredible.
So good.
He's very much known for his stand-up is one long form story that has many, many parts, very funny. It's also full of warmth and love, a lot of family, a lot of just very, very, very funny things. But also he like manages to like weave in these like beautiful, like these very sad moments too, and find the humor in that. I 100% agree with you. And also on the topic of Maria Bamford, I mean, she's also someone who is incredible and hilarious. And I know from other interviews is kind, obviously, as well, but she's also kind of weird, but like very much owns it and is like, this is, and like, again, like, this is who I am. These are the things that I like to talk about. This is what I find funny, and has like made a very fascinating niche for herself at a time and in a comedy market that was kind of just starting to allow those types of voices. She was sort of the first one to kind of do that like weird kind of stand up. And then she started getting into like more acting pieces. She was on Arrested Development. She was like on a bunch of things. So incredible. But did you have anyone else aside from Michael Bigley? Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh no. I mean, when I first started doing stand-up, I felt like I had to get some mentors because I didn't, have the experience as a child. Like, I remember as a child knowing of and liking Margaret Cho because she would do impressions of her parents and I would impersonate my dad, like, for my other family members. And so I remember watching her on TV and being like, you could do that? Like, that's what I do at dinner. And, not at that level, but thankfully I was young enough that I wasn't like even comparing myself in that way. And then Joan Rivers, who I was lucky enough to see live 3 times, basically because I, not that I wasn't a fan, like I knew her from the Muppets movie, with like the Rouge and but it was very much like this intentional thing after I started doing comedy that I was like, I need to find some people, So,
all right. So you're in LA, you're doing your thing.
Yeah.
You move back, you're back in New York and the pandemic.
Jersey.
You're quarantined.
Yes.
What have you been up to in the last, I'm about to shock everybody, in the last 6 months? What have you been up to?
I know. Well, I mean, I'm very thankful that, I'm back. Again, like LA was great, but I knew I was coming back. I'm getting married and my wife is a rabbi in New Jersey. And so, that was always where I was going to come back. I grew up in New Jersey. And so I'm thankful that I'm able to be here and to like see my mom a lot and stuff like that is very important to me. So I've been doing a lot of that, of like going between, my apartment and my mom's house and stuff like that. In terms of like work and projects, I have a lot of footage. I've kept it for years. And in the pandemic, I started, mostly just because I was missing people, I started making like little mashup videos of like footage that I've kept of my brother, my mother, my dad, my wife, my girlfriend, so I've been doing stuff with that. And then I did this show for Eshel recently, and it was like a pre-recorded show. And because of that, I was like, okay, it's pre-recorded, so you can kind of play. And I did this whole thing about bombing, basically, because I was basically like the conceit of the piece. It's just like a 3.5-minute thing. But the conceit of it is everybody in this pandemic is like, oh my God, I miss being on stage live. And I do too. But I was like, but being on stage live isn't always that great. And I was like, I bomb all the time. And I did this like mashup of like me bombing from all this footage I had. And then I go into the fact that I've been bombing actually for longer than I've been doing stand-up comedy because I bombed my bat mitzvah speech. and I have the footage of it. So I'll say that and nothing else, just in case, about that video specifically, just in case people want to find it. You can find it on my Instagram, which is @Liz Glazer. And I think, you know, it's like one of the more recent posts. But anyway, I've been working with my footage to kind of make longer video pieces, which has been fun.
Great. If anyone has any questions for Liz, we're going to try and wrap up in the next few moments. Please send us in the Q&A. I was going to ask how people can find you if they're not already friends with you on Facebook or on Instagram. You're what? You're at Liz Glazer.
At Liz Glazer, at Elizabeth Glazer on Twitter, because I feel like I'm in trouble on Twitter. So.
Yeah, one of the one of the great joys that I get I run the as I'm sure many of you know, I run the alumni Facebook and Instagram pages, and so I get to keep tabs on everybody, and sort of whenever you post, if you're friends with Ramaz alumni, we get to see each other's posts, obviously. And so before we started talking, I would see your posts and I would always chuckle at them. And I didn't realize you were a comedian. I just thought you were very funny because, it's always nice to have somebody who posts funny stuff on Facebook. And then a colleague was like, no, she's a comedian. She's hilarious. You need to reach out to her. And I was like, I will.
Thank you. Well, I take that as a compliment because I'm vegetarian and I'm sober. And I tell you that because I don't normally tell people. And the best compliment I can ever get is when someone's like, I didn't know you were a vegetarian. I'm like, thank God. Or I didn't know that you were sober. I'm like, fantastic. Because it's something that like a lot of people who fall into those categories like will not shut up about. Of course, the catch is that then I want people to know that I don't say it. So then I have to say it to say that I don't say it. But anyway, but so similar to that, when someone's like, oh, I didn't know you were a comedian. I just thought you were funny. I'm like, perfect.
It seems like we answered everyone's questions with this chat because there's nothing new no questions. I will just leave you with this, just in terms of doing stand-up during the pandemic. One of the like purest and funniest moments that I've experienced in the last few months is, as many of my colleagues know, I would watch Governor Cuomo's press briefings. I would try and watch them every morning, sometimes to the lateness of our team meetings. And one day, in an effort to encourage folks to wear masks, he brought Rosie Perez and Chris Rock out as celebrity guests. And Chris Rock sits down and picks up his mic, and he literally like looks at it lovingly and says, I haven't touched a microphone in 4 months. And then starts doing like 2 minutes on a microphone, like how long it's been since he had a mic. And it was just like it was just like the purest form of comedy, because he was literally so happy to have a microphone and an audience to do it in front of. And I was laughing. I was sitting with my roommate and I was like, you have to come here. And I like rewinded the press briefing to show her what it was. It was really, and I don't even know if it was that funny looking back on it now, but it was just like, you could see how much joy he had.
Well, that's, I think, what I love the most about comedy is like, sure, there are some things that are just like, oh my God, isn't this a great joke? But the kind of things that I love the most are just like, this moment was elevated so much because we all got to laugh. And so I share that. I mean, I didn't see that specifically, but it sounds great. And that's exactly the kind of thing that I aim to create, and love to watch, is just like someone being like, let's make this moment fun with this thing that's like there for us to, look at and laugh at and stuff like that. So thank you for sharing that.
All right, Liz, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you,
everyone out there this evening, thank you so much for joining us. Please stay tuned for more programs coming the next few weeks. With the school year starting, don't worry, we're going to continue all of our Zoom programs for the alumni and for the Ramaz community. Stay safe, stay dry, and we'll see you all soon. Have a wonderful evening, have a wonderful week, and we'll see you all later.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Liz. You were amazing. You're amazing.
Thanks,
it's terrific
Penny.
to have you.
Thank you.
Really terrific.
Thank you. It was really